Hello everybody, and welcome to Movies by McManus, the channel where we break down movies, comics, TV, books, whatever kind of media you're into, in the context of who created it and what effect it's trying to have on the world. And today we're going to be breaking down the 2019 film The Sound of Metal, directed by Darious Marder. The Sound of Metal follows Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, a punk metal drummer who travels on the road from show to show with his girlfriend and bandmate Lou. Due to years of unprotected noise damage to his ears, Ruben finds his hearing quickly deteriorating, until eventually he becomes fully deaf. Since Ruben is a traveling musician, when he loses his hearing, he doesn't just lose his source of income, but his identity and his true passion as well. Ruben is also a recovering drug addict and finds his purpose in life through music. He uses music and the constant movement of the road life as a way of keeping his mind off his past and away from the temptations of using again. Since he can't afford surgery for cochlear implants, which would help regain some of his hearing, Ruben joins a home for deaf addicts and tries to find a way to live life without sound. In Ruben's newly found deaf community, it's made clear that they are not looking for a solution for hearing loss, but instead trying to find beauty in a world that is silent. This goes to the main message of the film, which portrays deafness not as a disability, but instead as a culture. Through a combination of visuals and touch, the deaf community is actually able to express themselves more thoroughly than with words alone. There's a saying in the real-life deaf community that hearing people are emotionally repressed because they hide behind their words. And Ruben, while living in the home for deaf addicts, finds ways to express himself even more properly than he was beforehand. Ruben even learns how to play music without his hearing. By feeling the vibrations of a beating drum or the strings of a piano, he's able to find just as much beauty in the feel of music that he was in the sound of music. Ruben even begins to teach deaf children how to play the drums, becoming a full part of the deaf community, not just as a student, but also as a teacher. The actor Riz Ahmed actually wore auditory blockers throughout the filming of this movie. So, in all the scenes where Ruben is supposed to be deaf, Riz Ahmed actually couldn't hear. And what Ahmed says that he learned most when he wasn't able to hear was how to listen. This plays into the central theme of the movie. The entire message is that deaf people are in fact not disabled, but can express themselves and pick up on emotions even more so than the rest of the population who are reliant on sound. Most of the actors who play deaf characters in this movie are in fact deaf in real life, with the exception of Paul Reese, though he has two deaf parents and grew up in a deaf community. And director Darious Marder communicated with his actors mostly in sign language. This sense of community is very important for our protagonist Ruben, who has now found a new identity and, for a brief moment, inner peace. That is until he begins to self-sabotage. While this film is about embracing the deaf community, it isn't only about that. Just as important to Ruben's character as being deaf is the fact that he is a recovering addict. Even in the scenes before Ruben loses his hearing, there is still a sense of intense anxiety. Ruben is pretty much always moving and making plans for either his next gig or his upcoming album. One of Ruben's main character flaws is his inability to achieve stillness. For Ruben, someone who's constantly running away from his past, To sit still in the present would be allowing his past to catch up with him. Now, while this is the first feature film that Darious Marder has directed, it's not the first that he's written a screenplay for. In 2012, Darious Marder wrote the screenplay for The Place Behind the Pines, directed by Darious in France, who co-wrote The Sound of Metal. The protagonist of The Place Behind the Pines, Luke, is very similar to The Sound of Metal's protagonist, Ruben. They both are on the run from their past, they both self-sabotage, and they both refuse to accept their current situation. In The Place Behind the Pines, our protagonist Luke is a bank robber who tries to win back the mother of his child, and refuses to accept that she doesn't want to be with him. Similar to how Ruben never fully accepts that he has gone deaf, and that his hearing is not going to come back. Luke takes more and more risks as a bank robber, believing that if he can make enough money, his ex will respect him enough to take him back. He keeps making plans for future bank robberies, unable to sit and accept his current situation. This is more or less Ruben's same character flaw. Constantly moving and making plans for the future, unable to accept the fact that there are some things in his life that he does not have control over. While in the deaf community, Paul Reese's character Joe tries to help Ruben by having him sit in a room alone, trying to practice just sitting, not moving forward, not staying in constant motion, and not making plans for the future. According to Joe, it's the moments of stillness where we find the most peace. That the world is hectic and crazy, but it's the small moments where we're able to stop and just breathe in our present selves that we find the most happiness. And Ruben almost does achieve stillness. In his new deaf community, he finds a family and a new identity, and is able to just breathe in the moment without having to push forward to whatever comes next. But Ruben eventually self-sabotages. Like Luke in The Place Behind the Pines, Ruben's constant need to escape his current situation just leads him into more problems. In the end, Ruben's need to keep pushing forward gets the better of him. He ends up selling everything in his possession to pay for his hearing implants so that he could rejoin with his girlfriend and bandmate and continue with their music career. Because of this, Ruben is more or less exiled from the deaf community. Because Joe believes so thoroughly that deafness is not something that needs to be cured, he believes that Ruben's presence there would be hurtful to the other addicts. And then things turn even worse for Ruben. After his implants are activated, he realizes that while they do help him hear sounds, it's not a full return to normal hearing. The way cochlear implants work is that they trick the brain into thinking it's hearing, when in fact the ears are not working. This creates a tinny, almost static-like sound. For Ruben, the functionality of hearing has returned, but the beauty of sound has not. Ruben returns to his girlfriend Lou, who is now living with her father in France. Almost immediately, we can tell that there is something different about their relationship. And when he brings up going back on tour and continuing with their album, she backs away. We can tell that this is not what she wants anymore. Lou has achieved stillness. The idea of living on the road, going from show to show, and being in constant movement is no longer appealing to her. She's done what Ruben couldn't. She's able to sit and just be in her present moment. In the final scene of the film, Ruben sits alone on a bench in Paris, surrounded by the static noise of the world. Finally, Ruben takes off his external implants, preferring silence to the static sounds. And then, Ruben just sits in stillness, not thinking of the future or trying to outrun his past, but instead just being in the present moment. And in silence, the movie ends. Now, on a personal note, one of the reasons I related to this film so much and wanted to break it down on this channel is because I also have hearing loss, though not as bad as our protagonist Ruben does. But like Ruben, there was a time when I really didn't accept it, and I kept believing that eventually my hearing would get back to normal. Of course, it never did, but I still understand Ruben's struggle. And for me, that made the movie that much more enjoyable. So, if you have an opinion on The Sound of Metal, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, check out our podcast, and follow us on social media at Movies by McManus. I'm your host, Greg, and have a good night.